What did you say?
I said you're not my mother!
I am your mother!
Hi, I'm Jennifer Kent, the director of The Babadook, and I'm here at the IndieWire Studios in New York to record the Filmmaker Toolkit podcast. Thank you for watching.
So, the 10th anniversary of The Babadook, I'm wondering if you've gone back in your mind to Sundance was the first screening, right?
Yeah.
What was that like, January 2014? What was that screening like?
It was incredible because Sundance told us 6 months before we were the first film chosen for that year, and we had to keep it quiet for 6 months until they announced it.
I know people that find out in early November and they can't keep their mouth shut till Thanksgiving.
Yeah,
so.
I know. I was like a vault. I mean, we had each other. You know, we could sort of celebrate it amongst ourselves, but then, you know, I'd never made a feature film before, and going to Sundance, which to me was, to all of us, was an iconic festival, and to have that midnight slot, just, it felt so perfect. And I remember as soon as the film finished and the credits started rolling, there was a woman in front who said quite loudly, "Well, that was crap." And so I thought, oh no, my career flashed before my eyes, you know, in 30 seconds. I thought, oh, it's all over. Mm-hmm. But then I realized that, you know, there were other thoughts and feelings about the film coming out of there. And it was just so wonderful to celebrate with all our mates who we'd made this film with, you know, for next to nothing.
I'm sure you'd shown it before. You probably hadn't had an audience though, right? So, I mean, because one of the things is that, I mean, I'll just say this. I was thinking about, I said this at the time, but I think it still holds true 10 years. I mean, I think this is the most self-assured, confident, expertly directed first feature I've seen this decade.
Oh, wow. Thank you.
And you have, and I'm wondering if you could feel in that first audience the fact that the audience, you had the audience reacting the way that, you know. That
I mean, it is a wonderful thing to hear an audience, or to hear them, you know, making noise or not breathing, or you can feel a tension building. So I felt relaxed, really, and, you know, subsequent. And then the reviews came out and you kind of breathe a sigh of relief that it's not eviscerated publicly. So I felt I was so ready to make that film. You know, I'd been an actor for many years and I'd been a storyteller since I was a kid. And so to get that opportunity, I really prepared well. And yeah, I mean, you never can know.
Yeah. You
can't know how it's going to go.
Well, because it is such an impressive debut, and I hope you'll indulge me, I'd love to find out what led up to this, because you went to a prestigious acting school, right? The National Institute. I mean, I think like Kate Blanchett was probably probably around your year.
Yeah,
probably, right?
So Essie, who was the lead in Babadook, and Kate were in the year below me.
Yeah.
So I got to see all of their plays going through.
I mean, it's just not a casual, like, I studied acting in college.
It was definitely, it was a big deal getting into that, even because there was, I think, 16 of us chosen and thousands audition, thousands upon thousands. So it was seen as very prestigious. And
so you were working actress for a while, but that never really took. That doesn't really what you kind of knew.
I mean, as a kid, this is going to sound terribly precocious, but I did, as soon as I could read and write, I was reading and writing plays and acting in them and directing them. So, but I just didn't know as a little girl that girls could direct films. I mean, that never occurred to me. So as I just involved myself in any storytelling I could and kept writing plays.
So instinctively, you were just telling stories. Just the idea of professionally that you would become a director was not like...
maybe a theatre director, but I never... And it wasn't, an era that's gone where now, I mean, you can pick up an iPhone, I guess, and make a film, or it's much cheaper and there's more people out there doing it, in every kind of platform, from YouTube and beyond. But I just got bored with acting very quickly. So I studied for 5 years. I did 2 years in another school before NIDA. And then I thought, this is not where I'm going. So
I read this quote, I didn't like being told what to do.
Yeah. It's terrible. It's terrible.
That's a director.
That's
a director. If
yeah. Don't tell me what to do. I have to. You're the actor. But I just also didn't like. I mean, when I was doing Shakespeare and Chekhov and things like that, it was sublime, and you're lifted up to the material. But most of the time, you're not doing that, And I didn't want to spend my life doing TV commercials or bit roles on series. And it wasn't a time where Australian actors were coming to America and doing the kind of pilot season. And now people don't even go to NIDA; they just come straight here, which may or may not be good. But yeah, so I just set about finding my own. I didn't want to go to film school. I didn't want to study something and then end up hating it. So I went and worked with Lars von Trier on Dogville. With him. I mean, I worked as a dog's body on that film.
You wrote Lars von Trier a letter after seeing Dancer with the Dark. And I wonder if you could tell me about it, because I think, if I'm understanding this correctly, you kind of proposed almost an apprenticeship or an assistantship to like, you don't like film school, but can I turn Dogville into my film school?
Well, I wrote to him in this sort of off the cuff kind of way. I said things like, I'd rather stick pins in my eyes than go to film school. I really don't want to learn in that way. And I said that I'm quite subversive by nature. And I've just been incredibly moved by his films. And I got a message straight back. And I got a friend to call Filmburen, which was their production hub, and ask what Lars's email address was. And they gave it to him. And then I wrote to Lars directly. And I got a message back from his assistant saying, Lars just doesn't do that. And then I thought, oh, well, I tried, follow my instincts. And then about an hour later, I got a message back again. She said, Lars has just read your email and he wants to know what you would like to do. And I was so green. I think I said, I'd like to be first AD or something ridiculous. And they said, no, but you can't just be part of the wallpaper, because they're a social democratic society. So they were like, what do you want to do? And I mean, they offered me one day on set. And I got the means together and flew from Sydney to Denmark on the promise of one day. And then when I got there, they thought, oh, she's genuine, and they liked me and let me stay for the whole thing.
What did you take from that experience? I mean, Dogville's a very unusual film. He is not a normal director, and I don't mean that. I say that with all due respect and compliments, but I'm like, what do you think? Because I don't think you're sitting there. Your film language is so specific. It's not. I'm sure there's no distinct. I'm not trying to make a parallel to the films, but I'm wondering what you took from the way he organized sets and how you wanted to do it.
Yeah, I don't think we're similar filmmakers,
No.
but I think what he has in all of his work, and what I truly admired, was a singular vision that he protected from start to finish. And surprisingly, that's actually very rare. So even now, I think it's gotten worse. It's harder for people to protect. But I learnt that from watching him. And I also learnt the whole us and them, this idea of, oh, I'm just a lowly person trying to make films and you're a genius. It's sort of that divide evaporated. I don't mean I started to think I was a genius. I just mean that I thought I can do this. So it gave me the confidence to do it my way. As long as I just could protect the work, I would throw myself in. Yeah.
So my other understanding is you wrote a lot of scripts.
Yes.
That didn't get produced, and that didn't. What was different about The Babadook, and where did that come from?
It was a conscious decision for me to make an achievable film. Other ones before, maybe they were period, or maybe there was a bigger budget involved, or maybe they were just too out of the realm of people's understanding so that no one wanted to finance them. And with The Babadook, I made a conscious decision, okay, I'm going to write a film in a house with two people, and I don't know what that is. And I had lost, my dad died, and so I was in a space of grieving, and that's how this kind of idea started to brew. But it was very, much more financially achievable than any of the scripts I'd written before that. But you know, if I didn't write those scripts, then I think Babadook wouldn't have been a good script. It probably would have, you know, I practiced. I don't regret writing those scripts.
No,
I think.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure. I think one thing that's interesting is you've spoken about this before about the stemming from grief, and one thing that I in terms of the mechanics, there's something here that I feel like is such a payoff, which is this suppressing of this sense that like you're not going to feel something or you're going to push it down, and that's and I think that ability for us to feel that, and then that the horror emerges from that. I'm wondering if you talk about that, because I think that's key to. I mean, I know that was a creative breakthrough for you, but I feel like that also might speak to some of the things of why this story registers so much.
Yeah, I think because I do think it is. You've hit on something, that it is a film not about grief. It's actually about suppression of feeling, which is why I think that the film. I wanted the film to start with sort of a gentle pair of hands around your neck, and then it just tightens and tightens till you can't breathe. And so I think it starts off with a discombobulating, sort of anxious, anxiety-inducing shot of her. Is she in a car? What's going on? What's happening? And then she's dreaming. So, yeah, I think that thing of pushing down on something so much that it splits off and becomes its own energy is very true to the experience of not being able to feel something for whatever reason. And in Amelia's case, you understand. I mean, look at what happened to her. We learn what happened to her. So how can you face that? And that was my starting point of, and I think that's universal, you know. No one wants to feel pain. It's shitty. It's horrible. But the alternative, I feel, is worse. And I think that's probably where the horror comes from.
A little spoiler here for people that go see this movie, and it's
You're
funny.
allowed spoilers.
No,
10 years away.
No. Spoiler for those that go see this re-release of the film. There's a wonderful, and the IFC publicity team shared it with me. A wonderful conversation between you and Alfonso Cuarón, who's on the podcast this fall talking about his new show. We've had him on before. It's great. It's a wonderful discussion, and there's a moment in that I wanted to talk about because there's something that came from this where. Alfonso's, like all of us, a big fan, and he was talking. He said something about like it being a projection, the Babadook being a projection of what's going on internally, and it was very interesting because you said,
"What did I say? I can't remember. It was 3 a.m.
But is it a projection?
Yeah.
And that idea, there was this idea that possibly that even as you're in your mind as a storyteller, we're talking about suppressing and then what emerges. Yeah. Who's to say what's real or not, or, you know, and not to think of it as a projection of her internal state, but that as it, to accept it as real.
Yeah, I mean, for example, say there's a woman who's undergoing postpartum psychosis, which is a terrifying, from what I've read about it, a terrifying condition. Those things that she's hallucinating are real. They're fully real to her in that experience. And I think that's where the terror comes. I mean, who's to say that this thing isn't real on some level, you know?
And I think
I certainly treated it as if it was real.
You have to believe that as a storyteller, right?
Yeah.
So one thing, the book, obviously the book got released. The Babadook, the kids' book, the picture book did get released. But I was interested in the fact when I was doing research that it was very important to you to figure out that book ahead of time. Yeah. This is not a prop.
No.
You needed to figure out and have the design of that book to make this movie. I wonder if you could talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, it was absolutely integral because it wasn't like we create the film, and then we just fashion the prop and then put it in there. It really started, the whole visual world of the film started with the book. And you know, I mean, I had an idea of what the world was going to look like, but it needed to radiate out from that. So the house, everything should have, you know, hopefully feels real, but slightly hyper-real. So that it didn't seem ridiculous that this book just turned up on the shelf. It somehow felt organic to that environment. And, you know, who made it? Well, we don't know. But it somehow lives in that house.
Because the design of the film it took you a while to get this right. You hired an illustrator, and it took you a
Yeah,
while.
yeah.
I'm blanking on his name, Alex.
Alex Uhas. Yeah.
It's brilliant. It's brilliant work, but it took you a while, like with any collaborator, to get that right, right?
Yeah.
Because I mean, and I'm wondering if you kind of alluded to this, but because there's a certain element of the design of the film that grows out of this book,
Yeah.
right?
Well, Christina Seaton was such a supportive producer in that she always knew what was important. So it was a big expense on a 1.6 million budget to get an illustrator out for months to work on this book, but she understood how important it was. And so he just took direction. You know, he also, he had a style that I thought, this is perfect. But then as we worked through it, he took direction and did many prototypes. And then he wasn't really a paper engineer, but fashioned this book, which I now own, sits in my closet.
You have the original.
Yes, yeah. And it's something, it was a joy to make that book come alive. But we actually went through a number of artists before that it just didn't feel right. You know, but then eventually we hit on Alex, and he was the right person.
And what about the Babadook itself? Like, where did you, I know there's a lot of different, I think there was a 1927 movie.
Yeah.
But we could go through all the various influences, but I'm very curious, like, what were you reaching for? Because it's in terms of like creating that, because it is so frightening, but it is so distinct and kind of handmade looking to a certain degree.
Well, I think that line, I'm paraphrasing my own film. I can't remember what I wrote, but something like, once you see what's underneath, you're going to wish you were dead. It needed to allude to something operating that outside mask. So it needed to feel like, it was from a children's POV. A child could have made up that, could have drawn that. But then it also needed to feel like a man, but not. So it needed to feel like head to toe like a mask. And it was seeing that London After Midnight, Lon Chaney image, which is quite sort of hokey because he's got his eyes, pushed apart by, I assume, tape. And his teeth, they're obviously fake, but that in itself is quite horrifying. This sort of gauche, quality to it. So
Lon Chaney early makeup job, there is something about them
incredible.
But they still are effective.
They are.
They're very
they
effective.
are, and he did it himself.
Yeah.
Which is incredible to me that so he sat there and worked out what was scary. Also, that film, The Man Who Laughed. Have you ever seen the photo? You can even just Google it, and the image comes up of this man with this really extreme grin, which kind of frightened me as well. And if you look at all the elements, they're all, his face is like a mask, certainly in the book. Because underneath, we never see what's underneath, of course.
I'm embarrassed to ask this question because I've read this a few different times about the film, and I literally don't understand it. I understand what stop animation is.
Yeah.
I don't understand how the Babadook is, the literal monster is stop animation. Help me understand how you did this.
Yeah, in terms of how did we capture it?
Yeah, because it's like, what was on?
It's literally standing there, or actually, I did that because when I shot Monster, we did it on film, so it was actually capturing frames. But here, it's like taking a photograph and then moving,
What is it? Though? Is it a puppet? Is it a?
No,
there's someone played the Babadook.
Yeah.
And you did stop motion with them.
So then we have the frames of it's like taking a series of photographs, and then you can lift frames out, so it suddenly goes like that. And that's how it looks jerky and insect-like. Because I also wanted the Babadook to feel like a cockroach or a bug insect of some sort.
You also wanted it lo-fi. You specifically wanted something lo-fi.
Yeah,
right?
I wanted to know what we'd shot in that day is what I'm going to have in the edit suite. And I think the reason, and I'm working on a film at the moment where we have the opportunity to do lots of VFX. I don't want to do them. Because I think the brain registers something in camera very differently, and it's much more frightening usually if it's done well, because you're seeing something that actually existed rather than something that's post-produced. And I just don't find that scary.
I think you had like 3 weeks to shoot this. Is the stop?
Oh, no, we didn't.
No, you didn't.
No,
We had
that's not true.
What is it?
6 weeks.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so
6 weeks? How many days is
somewhere
that?
out there it says 3 weeks, but so
30.
basically that makes
Yeah.
more sense.
We had 30 days to shoot.
Now that makes
which
more
for
sense.
a low budget film is quite a lot.
Still
actually.
moving. Still moving.
Oh yeah, it's moving.
I
It's
just
not like
I
having
couldn't.
cups
I
of
can't
tea
do the
and-
math on the stop
Yeah.
animation
Yeah.
in 3 weeks though.
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
Well, those things we also did with very small crew.
Mm.
So anything that was sort of technical and effecty, we did, with just less people, so we could take longer.
Now you built the interiors on a stage, right? The main house.
Yeah.
And you were alluding to this before. Obviously, the design of the book and the fact that this character could exist in this world. You
Yeah.
don't want to shoot. But I'm wondering, one of the cheapest things that we journalists do when we write about this film, write about something, is be like, it's a reflection of the mental state of the, and I don't think that's a cheap thing to say with your movie, but
No.
I am very curious because we are so invested and so in a psychological space
Yeah.
with your film. And I don't want to just write it off as it's a reflection of the character. I'm wondering how you thought of that space. I know you were saying before.
The physical space?
Yeah,
you mean?
the interior.
Yeah,
because
I mean, it
it's-
was very important, super important. I think the films that influenced me most there are probably one film, The Tenant.
the Polanski.
Yeah. There's one shot where he's out of it and he's been hallucinating and he reaches for a bottle of Evian and he can't get it. It's actually painted on the wall. And the set, if you look at it, is kind of the whole perspective is skew-if, and that's in the design. They've built a bed that's out of proportion and it gets smaller or bigger depending on how far away it gets. I didn't notice that. I watched it a number of times before I actually noticed, oh my God, that's not real. And I think he plays with space so much in that film that's truly disturbing. It's like a paranoiac's nightmare, that film. So that really influenced this idea. Originally, we were going to film in a terrace because we were meant to film in Sydney. But then we moved the production to Adelaide and there are no terraces. So we, absolutely had to build. We didn't have a choice because we couldn't find any interior location for the terrace. But the studio was a godsend because we had no roof. So we could go up high and we could take out walls. And the final confrontation with Amelia and this force, we could rip the whole room apart, which, we did. So it all worked out in the end. But yeah, that space, I mean, it's down to Alex Holmes, the production designer, how beautiful that space was to work in.
How did you think of the camera movement in this? I mean, it's so, well, I don't want to, I rewatched part of it last night and I marvel at how much you're able to get at an emotion or get at a psychology with the camera movement. How did you
I
think
have
of
a
it?
weird visual sense that, I mean, I know that Radek, the DOP, has said to me, Jan, like he said, I've never, he's Polish and he's very serious. But he said, I've never known a director have their film in their head. And of course I didn't have the whole film in my head. I mean, his work was extraordinary in that, and he came up with many things I hadn't thought of. But I'm writing a film at the moment, and there's a point where it kicks in and I'm seeing the film in my head. I'm seeing shots. And so this, to me, felt like it needed to have a very old school approach. And I tend to gravitate. I watch older films
You
anyway.
watch a lot of silent films for this one, right?
Yeah, I watch a lot of silent films and a lot of sort of early talkie films. And there was just such an artful quality to them that was poetic as well as frightening. And so, yeah, it was just by studying those and feeling what the images needed to be. I can say that the film's shots started very central. If you look at them, they're very balanced. And then as things start to go a bit weird, characters end up on the edge of frame with a lot of darkness in the empty space. And the film got more and more black and white. We stripped color from the set. So you know.
And you originally saw this movie in black and white, right?
No, I think Radek mentioned that once. I didn't. I was very influenced by black and white horror, but I actually didn't want to make it necessarily in black and white. I toyed with the idea very briefly, and then I thought, no, I want to inject color and then bleed it of color, drain it of color.
Two actors in a contained space.
Yeah.
Great idea. You know, horror, great something you control for a makeable film for a smaller budget. Obviously, the lead actress, a friend of yours, a very talented actress, someone you went to school with. Obviously, you have a shorthand.
Yeah.
On the other side, I wonder if we could talk a little bit about Noah, because it's a 6-year-old in this movie, and there are ways to shoot smaller children in a way that their reaction and whatnot. He carries a lot.
I know, he really does.
And I'm wondering if you talk about, because that's got to be, there had to have been a certain approach.
Yeah, definitely.
To finding this kid. But I also was reading he actually was 6.
Yeah. I mean, it was 5 when we auditioned him and starting, and then turned 6, during filming.
Because working with kids is hard I have friends that work in production, and every time there's a kid on set, there are considerations and there are limitations of what you can do. But you're also dealing with something where the other half of the movie, the reverse, isn't something he can see. It's not something you can't do that to a kid. And so I'm wondering how you found him, how you worked with him, because it's remarkable what you got from him and what he was able to do.
Well, I think it goes back to me being an actor as a kid, voluntarily wanting to do it, not professionally, but I didn't want to talk down to him. I know that kids have a lot of intelligence and understanding of what's going on around them. So I made sure that he was front and center. When I decided he's the one. Oh, that's the other thing. Auditioning, we auditioned several hundred children and just weeding out people. And then we got a longer shortlist, and I would audition, say, a boy who had talent and was very good but got bored after one take. I thought, forget it. And then as we started to, weed out the numbers, I would make sure that I would audition the parents as well. I don't mean literally get them to do an audition, but I would check out who they were and whether they were going to be supportive or destructive of the whole process. And so once we got Noah on board, I just made sure that he knew how important his job was in this. So I told him the story of the Babadook from Sam's perspective. It was the same story. It was the G-rated version, of course, but he knew that if he didn't help his mum, Amelia, in the story, that she might die. So he knew that it was very, very serious. And he just, I mean, I went with my gut, because what else can you do when you're casting a 6-year-old? And I knew that I had the sort of skill and experience with kids to never look down on them. And it was terrifying, especially early on. I thought, is he going to be able to do it? And then after a couple of days, I thought, this is going to work. We need more time to get the performance. And I would just keep rolling. So I wouldn't cut and, then start up again. I would just keep rolling. And then it was a joy to see him realize that he could act and that he was good.
And you said before that you had created a story where he knew that he had to do these things. You constructed a whole movie for him, right? Like you constructed a whole story for him, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, you mean as in a backstory?
Yeah. Like, no, I mean, something, so he's understanding of the movie.
Yes.
Right? Like there was a
whole... he needed to understand it. And then, I mean, I've told this before, but his mother, who's a child psychologist.
That helps.
Yes. And a really lovely, loving mum and person. So he was very secure. And, she said to him one day, sort of in awe, she said, you don't focus at school. Like, here is her focus. And he said, yeah, Mum, this is important. This is important. So he really felt this sense of, I'm doing something worthwhile here, incredible. I have worked with children who haven't been that special. And then you have to not trick them, but I've worked with another boy who got bored very quickly. We had less chance to audition more boys. So that was more challenging.
Because there's that moment of, what's he say? I know you don't love. You can't.
Oh.
What's
I know you don't love me. The Babadook won't let
He
you.
won't let you.
Yeah. I only remember that because it's heartbreaking
It's
the way that
heartbreaking.
Noah does that.
And that is a heartbreaking moment, but there's also a release in that. And I'm wondering if you talk a little bit about your approach to the end, because this movie obviously is dealing with some very dark stuff and goes to some very dark places, but it's unlike other horror films in the way it moves, in the way it carries that to the end.
Yeah. I mean, we protected Noah from a lot of, just on that score, we protected him from a lot of horrible stuff like Essie's character swearing at him. But here he had to be engaged, and he had to sort of be involved in seeing Amelia, his mum, in the film, vomiting up stuff, and he kind of, was present to that. But I've lost the question there, Chris.
The move towards the end, because that movie releases something, and it's not a traditional. Well, as to what is traditional and not traditional, the genre, who cares? But I mean, there is almost, for this very painful realization after it, a movement towards something a little bit more, almost of a release that you don't get in.
Yeah, as in towards the very end. Yeah, I think that the film is always traveling towards the light, and I always knew that. So in a way, that was my safety valve. I don't think it's a happy ending. I mean, you can't really say burying your dog and, your husband's dead and all these things. But there's a sense of, there's a suppression of tension. And I always knew that rhythmically then it would explode. And that's when it becomes, to me, really terrifying, because she's psychotic, or she's completely, this thing has entered her body. And then it's chaotic. But there's a point to it all. I think that there's a great love that Sam has for his mother. And he is the hero of this story. It really disturbed me when people said, oh, I want to kill that kid and I can't stand him. There was a lot of that on social media, which is why I don't look at social media. But I thought, wow, if you have no compassion for this child who really is the hero of this film, of this story, I worry for you. I think that the film can go to the depths because we actually make it through. I wouldn't be interested in a film that went to the depths and then collapsed. I see those films exist, but they don't really inspire me.
You mentioned social media. I have to ask you, because this film went and had a life of its own. Through memes, like years. I think it's like, it came out in 2014. It's like 2016. I think 2017. There's that Babadook meme, and suddenly it gets in. It has a whole. I mean, people love this film, and they found this film.
Yeah.
But then it has this whole other life in the LGBTQ community, to the fact that it got to the point that it was, when it was on Netflix, it got labeled an LGBT. There's a special edition of the DVD with the pride flag on it.
Yeah.
What was your take on that? Seeing that from
Well, initially I thought, what's going on? And then it didn't go away, and then I found it hilarious and then endearing. I mean, I'm a big RuPaul's Drag Race fan. So seeing it sort of featured on there was just a highlight for me. And I think that the film has been embraced in corners that, I love it. I love it. And also to be referenced in other films or other forms of media, it's very special, because when I was making this, people said, no one's going to remember the Babadook. That's the most ridiculous name. You have to change the name. But it seems to have stuck.
Where did that come from, the name?
Just me trying to find something onomatopoeic and something I could rhyme with. And I wanted a name that felt like a child had invented it.
Yeah, it's funny. I got confused at the time, because I was like, "Oh, did I miss subtext here? Did I miss the gay storyline?"
No.
And then someone had to explain. No, there was a picture, and then it took off. And
he lives in the closet. Yeah. He likes to dress well, and I think there was hilarious kind of references. So.
And I love this. You've made it very clear. No sequel.
No sequel.
There's no sequel.
No, forget it. Forget it.
No, there's no check in the world that's gonna.
No, I've been offered big checks.
Did you flirt with Hollywood after this, though? Because I mean, usually when you have a genre hit like this, and they see someone with this raw talent, I mean, given that their track record's not great with women directors, but there is a flirting with a genre director who exhibit so much control as you did on this one. Is that something that ever was
I've been
taken?
offered a lot of stuff, and I
Yeah.
still get offered,
Mhm.
you know, things. Not to sound, it's just true, and I always consider them actually, and I consider lots of things, and occasionally, like recently, a very wonderful author approached me and asked me to do something, and I'm doing it. And I can't talk about it right now. But generally, I find that something needs to come from me. So I do. I've been offered lots of big blockbuster
You gotta find
films.
your way into it. You gotta find your way into it.
Yeah. Sometimes you get offered something and it's a gift. Most of the time, I have to hard slog it out and write it myself. But there's many things in the works now, ready to be made next year. Something will give next year.
Well, we look forward to that.
Me too.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.